Daddy, where do babies come from?
Honey?
Mommy went to the store.
Oh, well, you see, there's a mommy and a daddy, right?
Right.
And see, when they call Geico, they could save a bunch of money on car insurance.
Oh, really? And that makes them happy?
Yes, that makes them very happy.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could have this talk, Sunshine.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Nonprofit U, a forum where nonprofit stakeholders can share lessons learned and discuss the latest developments in the industry. My name is Valerie, Leonard, your host. I'm a consultant to nonprofits, and I specialize in community and organizational development. I work with nonprofit organizations to help them make a stronger impact to their clients and communities. You can find Nonprofit U on Facebook and on Twitter. I encourage you to follow us and to comment early and often using the hashtags NonprofitU, Do Gooder Consulting, or 4 Steps to College, and that's the numeral 4 and numeral 2, so 4 Steps to College. You can also leave comments on blogtalkradio.com/nonprofit_U. The chat room is open right now, and you can post comments and questions. In order to use the chat room, you must open a listener-only account, and you can find a link to open the account on the page for this episode. And you can also email me questions at consulting@valeriefleonard.com. We'll be taking questions by phone and from our chat room at about the 30-minute mark or so. The call-in number is area code 347-884-8121. Again, that number is area code 347-884-8121. Today's topic is 4 Steps to College. We'll talk about some of the issues that students face when financing their college education, and we'll also share winning strategies that provide an overview of the work to do Gooder Consulting and the work that they've done in education and nonprofit arenas. We have extended our podcast to 1 hour, and we encourage you to call in with questions at the 30-minute mark. You can start posting in the chat room and emailing questions right now. Again, my email address is consulting@valeriefleonard.com. If you want to participate in the live chat, you must open an account, and a link is found on the episode page. Again, the call-in number is 347-884-8121. Nonprofit and community development professionals, as well as parents and counselors and folks who are involved in the education arena, are especially encouraged to call in and share your stories. Today's guest is J.P. Paulus. J.P. grew up in Hoffman Estates and went to school at Northwestern University. He then moved to the north side of Chicago, where he started his involvement with urban ministry through the Uptown Baptist Church. His work with Uptown's youth ministry developed his heart for networking and resourcing, becoming city networker for Youth Partners Net. JP spent time with the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, gaining much knowledge and passion to help students get to college and find the resources to graduate. He now lives in the Chatham community on the south side of Chicago and is the president of Do Gooder Consulting, where he provides consulting services for churches, nonprofits, and small businesses. He's also a writer for the Sixth Ward blog, which provides news and commentary for the neighborhoods in and around the Sixth Ward. And we should be reminded that this blog is not affiliated with any political organization. J.P. Paulus can be contacted by calling or texting 872-222-8008 or by email at jp@dogooder.us. The Do Gooder Consulting website can be found at www.do-gooder.us, and the Do Gooder blog with informational updates can be found at http://blog.do-gooder.us. So thanks for joining us today, JP.
Thank you, Valerie.
And before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about Do-Gooder Consulting, what brings you to this work with nonprofits, and most importantly, how you got to work working with parents to help them get their kids to college?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I've been working with nonprofits for about 20 years now, and
Wow.
some of the things I've noticed is that there are areas where some leaders really thrive in, but then there's some other areas such as administration where they kind of really fall short in, and so that's been on my mind over the past 20 years. And then in the middle of that time, I worked with the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, and was really blessed to work with a department that has a real sincere caring about families, and they just taught me not just about financial aid, which is their main mission, but also just the whole college-going process, and just how to connect with people and organizations to do that. Because of the lack of stability in our economy and in our own state government here in Illinois, felt that creating a consulting firm for churches and nonprofits might be the best way to use my talents for society. And the idea with being a consultant is that an organization could get a boost in a much-needed area, but they don't have to worry about layoffs because we would be doing it on a short-term basis. So rather, I want them to be feel empowered and receive some help, while also, like especially with churches, to be able to maintain their beliefs and their mission. And I think the consulting really sort of gives that flexibility for both ends. And my experience includes the financial aid and college-going process. Also building of youth worker teams, as well as administration and even basic web setup. And one of my other specialties that I'm just throwing out there if anybody needs it is I've also have experience with dealing with premature babies and the system that can help them with that. Yeah, so I have two daughters that are born. First one was born at 23 and a half weeks and 15 and a half ounces. And I think so I think 6 years later, she inspired her little sister to be born at 26 weeks and 1.5 pounds. And they're both doing great. Yeah, so they're both doing great. But there are a lot of lessons that I learned along the way that if there are any parents out there that need that kind of help, or if you know somebody needs that help, I can also help navigate that process too. There's some great resources out there, but if you don't know the system, it can you could miss out. But just any ways, I can help out. I'd love to do that.
Oh, that is awesome. And I want to say, you don't look like you've been doing anything on this earth for 20 years. You barely look like you've been here for 20 years.
Thanks.
That's great. So why should nonprofit leaders even care about issues of college education and finance? I know you're dealing with nonprofits as well as college education.
Yeah. Well, I think nonprofits really play a vital role in the college-going process. So many times our students are far more willing to talk to somebody who's in a nonprofit, like an after-school program or your church youth group, than they would their own parents. And I see that with my own family as well, that sometimes you just need somebody with an outside voice, that even though you might be saying the same thing the parents are, but you actually have an authority that the students will listen to. And the benefit for the organization, in addition to just the students' success themselves, is that then their students can also learn to give back. They'll have access to resources when they go to college, such as they might be able to bring a mission group over for the summer. That I know that's happened with a lot of churches. Also, in the long term, they might be willing to come back to your organization and bring the skills that they've learned, the connections they have, and then which could turn into donors and volunteers to the organization, and then just continue an upward cycle. And those students, because they're going to college, they'll have some credibility to create deep and lasting ties between the organization and outsiders, and that would benefit even more youth in the future. And I think just one thing that organizations do need to know, though, that they might feel like they're doing it, but that if they don't have somebody recently trained, that they really need to partner with somebody who does. Because even though you think I look kind of young, I remember way back in the day when we did the FAFSA on paper, and just some of the rules back then were that you're supposed to do that after taxes, and that was because they did things by hand, so the financial aid officers didn't want to mess with anything again. But with the advent of the web and laptop computers, the deadlines were changed, and the process for the financial aid officers is a lot easier. So they could. So now, what they up until recently, the deadline, the opening date was January 1st, and so where people used to wait until springtime to do financial aid, if they did, at least certainly in Illinois, it would be too late. By now, the deadlines of the Illinois MAP grant, for example, which is up to $4,000, that runs out in February, or has run out in February. And now with some more changes, they've actually moved the opening date for the FAFSA to October 1st. So basically that's 6 months earlier than when we did it back in our day. And so because of that, you need to really be up on it, and you really need to partner with somebody to know what are the right deadlines, and just doing these 4 steps in the right order can really help you be able to take advantage of all the new things that are happening.
Okay, now that's interesting, and I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself, but when you talked about making sure people do things in the right order, do you have a cheat sheet that will have major deadlines that parents should be aware of? Is that something that you have public, or do people need to make an appointment with you so that they can get access? Well,
you are talking a little bit ahead of time, because what I've done is I've set up some tweets ahead of time, and so part of that too is I've set up a few tweets that have that talk about deadlines and timelines for students. So starting even as early as middle school, of some things you need to do. So you guys can look forward to it. My Twitter handle is Do Gooder Chicago, and so if you go on that, things will be posting up. Actually, they probably have already started, so you can just check there, and that particular aspect should be up around the 240 mark or so.
Okay, awesome, and I will make sure that I go and get your tweets and retweet them, and we're also asking, that if you go to these tweets that you would retweet them as well, so we can get the word out. Oh, not a problem. So your company, Do Gooder Consulting, you have a 4-step to college program. Again, that's the numeral 4 steps, numeral 2 program. Can you tell us a little bit about that program?
Yeah, actually, it's a program that was actually developed by the Lumina Foundation at the end of the last decade. And when I started working with ISAC, they just started working with about 10 states to see how this program could be implemented nationwide. But however, for some reason, the board of Lumina decided to stop funding it, and they did pass on the intellectual property control to the American Council of Education. So there is material that's still out there, but again, they just like a number of different college-going programs over the years, I've noticed is that some great things will start up, but then for whatever reason they stop. But I found that even though they've sort of stopped that national funding for it, it still remains a simple, but it's a very strong framework for students, parents, and organizations to help their youth, to help steer them to a successful graduation from college. So again, it's something that's simple that, again, doesn't have to impede on, let's say, your theological mission or anything like that, but it's a great framework to help you just make sure you get all the things that students need for that.
Okay, great. All right, I want to remind our listening audience that you're listening to Nonprofit U, and we're speaking with J.P. Paulus, the president of Do Gooder Consulting. We're talking about financing college education and making wise decisions. We've extended our podcast to 1 hour, and we'll be taking questions from our listening audience and from our chat room at about the 30-minute mark. The call-in number is 347-884-8121. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. Are those 4 steps to college?
Yeah, well, step 1 is for the student to find a caring adult, and really students should be looking for several mentors to help them along the way. We have everything from, of course, parents should be a part of it, but teachers can be part of it, business leaders if they know where they want to go. And there's people that you can pick up along the line, certainly after-school programs and youth ministries. They can be part of that network. But the one thing that I would really suggest is that, especially with nonprofit organizations, they might be able to do this, is to help pull all those mentors together so that they're all on the same page. And so sort of like the opposite of intervention where a bunch of people who care about somebody are trying to stop them from doing something. This group can come together and help the students to be on the same page so that they aren't getting contradictory information. Now, everybody might have some different perspectives on things, but at least if they're all on the same page, the student can then make choices and really hear from different people and decide what's the best route for them. Step 2 is then to push yourself, which is encouraging students to try for harder classes, to take the tests that they need to be admitted, such as like the SAT, the ACT, or if they can take AP classes and tests. And the other thing that, again, especially with nonprofits that they can do is help them to participate in activities that make an impact. So rather than just goofing off or just doing playing games, that they can really do something that'll not only look good on a resume, but really help them to develop the right mindset. And that will give colleges and scholarship committees the opportunity to see the potential of that student. Step 3 is something that I would say is actually more important than step 4, which when I say step 4, people will immediately go to it. But step 3 is finding the right fit. And what that means is what makes sense for the student. So just an example of why that's important is that if a student got a full-ride scholarship to the Juilliard School of the Arts, which is a very prestigious university, I mean, most parents would automatically say, that's a no-brainer. Hey, yeah, go do it. But if the student has like 2 left feet and can't dance, they don't like painting, they don't understand the arts, they're just going to fail out of there, and it's going to waste everybody's time and money. But meanwhile, let's say if we know a student that, or there's a student that we know is going to be a successful doctor or lawyer, and they have that on their mind, that kind of student can, let's say, risk more financially by taking out more loans, because we know that they will be able to find work and pay that off. And so that in that case, even though the cost seems enormous, the payoff will come out in the end. But again, we need to know what makes sense for that student. And then I remember, like, when I went to school, again, I'm that old that I remember doing Scantron tests. And
oh, wow.
So
my goodness.
Yeah. So they filled out the bubbles, and at the end of that, it gave me a report that said that what was good field study for me would have been clergy and journalism. Now, especially at the time, I wasn't a very good speaker, and so I knew I wasn't a preacher. But if I had a good mentor back then, they would have been able to help point me out in the right direction and help me sort of get to this stage a lot earlier, where even though I'm not a pastor, like a preaching pastor, I do have a heart for ministry, and I've been able to help ministries along the way, and I might have been able to do that a lot quicker if I had somebody who could help me walk through the results of that test. And also then the journalism has come into play with writing blogs and presentations. So again, if somebody had known me and maybe known some of the upcoming technology, we might be able to get ahead of, let's say, like the web thing, because again, school when the web was just emerging, and so had I had the right mentor, might have been able to skip some things or be able to take advantage of that. And now these tests too are easily available on websites. So schools have a website. Maybe have a website called Naviance that they're part of, or College Greenlight is another one where students can take these tests and help them figure out what's the right fit for them. And then there's other tools to help them match them with the right college that makes sense based on that finding. And then step 4 is to find yourself some cash, so the whole financial aid piece. And we can elaborate that in a few minutes, but just to let people know, I actually do seminars that last somewhere between 1 to 2 hours to focus on financial aid piece. So we're only going to touch on some of the basic things, but there's a lot more to that. So again, so if I can plug my own business on that, that's what I do for organizations, to be able to help you walk through that and really make sure that you get everything that you need to know about that, because financial aid there's a lot of detail that's in there. But if you were able to walk through that, through a seminar to do that, you'll be able to touch base on everything that you need.
Okay, great. And before we go to the next question, I want to go back to the second step. And, that was where you're talking about push yourself and trying for harder classes, et cetera, et cetera. Would one way of pushing yourself also include those extracurricular activities that will help you build team building skills or leadership skills, and if so,
Absolutely.
what might be some examples?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in that case, that also helps with the student as well, that they can choose something that makes sense for them as well. So if they are into sports do qualify for that. If they are into arts, then there could be a number of art clubs, or also if they start a club too, that also looks great for colleges and scholarships as well, to show that you have some leadership skills. So so for students, we definitely encourage them, if there's something that they're interested in, to go for it. And if they have an interest in something but there isn't a club for it, starting one can be a great way to show some leadership, and that's a great way to push yourself.
Okay, great. And again, thank you so much for going over those 4 steps. And, you really delved deeply into the first 3 steps. But, of course, step 4, which includes money, is also very important. And, quite frankly, most parents might think about 4 before they think of any of the other steps. And sometimes that could be a daunting thought, the money. So can you talk about what financial aid is and where it comes from?
Yeah, well, basically financial aid is now, because of the Affordable Care Act, that's a great comparison, where with the Affordable Care Act, it really really asks that people contribute something to their health and their well-being, but then the government can also help people who don't have enough money to be able to cover that. And with the same way, college financial aid, you are supposed to be responsible for for paying for college as best you can, but if there are gaps, there are methods that are available through the government as well as private organizations as well to make that college education possible. And this financial aid comes from 4 different places. So like I mentioned, the federal government is one of the major sources, but also states can be another source. So, for example, in Illinois, through our MAP grant and other methods, that's a great source for financial aid. The college itself, the institution, has institutional aid that could help as well. But that would be something you need to ask for. And then the other sources, private sources, which come from a myriad of sources. So it may seem a little overwhelming, but you're just thinking of every place from your local church, your local business, to national foundations and corporations where you spend money every day. So the private sources, that's a major area we can look through. And then there are 2 types of financial aid as well that you want to look into. So first is gift aid, which is the kind that everybody likes because you don't have to pay it back. And those come in the form of grants and scholarships. And then the second type is self-help aid, which includes work-study, which is actually considered real financial aid, and loans. And we can definitely talk about that in a little bit as well.
Okay, great. So we definitely would love to learn more about this gift aid. So would you care to collaborate?
Absolutely.
Did I say collaborate? I'm sorry, that's Freud.
Well, we are collaborating, but I'll elaborate on that. Sure. So grants and scholarships. Anyway, so people use those terms interchangeably, but I'm going to give you some definitions, but I don't want people to get too hung up on them. But just to give you a general idea of what these 2 things are. So grants are generally needs-based, which that usually means financial aid, but it could also mean the needs of the community. So, for example, so there's several states as well as the federal government have grants for incentives for prospective teachers to entice them to work in high poverty settings. There are also grants for people who have served in the military. So Illinois, for example, has in addition to the federal program for veterans, Illinois has their own program as well. And you can compare and see what the requirements are to see if whatever is the best fit for you. But again, depending on the state, so Illinois is a really good state for these type of programs. Other states may not be as much, but again, the federal government definitely has some grants there. Now, the biggest financial need grants are the Pell Grants and the FSEOG grant. And then in Illinois, we also have a MAP grant. And so in the state of Illinois, for example, the maximum that you could get for combining all those is over $14,000. So there's definitely some money out there, but you won't be able to know that money until you apply your senior year of high school through the FAFSA, which is October 1st. And we may talk about later about that, about just how the changing deadlines, how, again, back when we did it, it was April 15th, but it's nowadays, it's 6 months earlier. So for that kind of grant money, you need to use the FAFSA, and there might be some other forms as well, but that's the main form you need to know for that. Now, scholarships, on the other hand, are based on usually based on who you are or what you've done. And they come from private sources. So there's all kinds of different areas that are there, different people who've put that out there. And because there's so many different kinds of criteria, I can't specify deadlines or amounts. But I sort of think of them like baseball cards, that you can and should collect them until you sort of complete your team of money. And there's different sources that are out there. Like there's a blog called Scholar Shop Mom. So not scholarship with an I, but Scholar Shop, SHOP, Mom. So that's a blog that helps you to find scholarships. But I would really just warn people just to make sure that you never pay for a scholarship or pay for a scholarship search, because there's just too much out there that for you to have to try to do that.
Too much free stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's also one of the things that you can help navigate, for your clients.
Absolutely.
Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
so going back to my Freudian slip, when I mentioned collaborate instead of elaborating, I believe that there are no accidents in this world. So given the collaboration, I'm just wondering if at some point you and I can, if not just amongst ourselves, but maybe with some other partners, collaborate, sometime maybe late summer toward back to school or very early fall, September, put on some sort of event where we're reaching out to kids and their parents. I mean, at a very minimum, I'm thinking a webinar. I guess in the best of all worlds, it'll be some live event where people can actually reach out and touch you, JP.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's also a great point too, just to make that I hadn't thought about before too, but just to remind people that because of all these changes, that you definitely want to plan ahead. And so again, with the FAFSA being available October 1st, that having that late summer, early fall seminars, that you want to put that as a nonprofit organization. You definitely want to have that on your calendar. And even if you're not necessarily the one that's leading it or hosting it, that at least if you're able to communicate things, that would be a huge benefit for your students. And so, for example, here on the south side of Chicago, we have the Silas Purnell College Expo that meets every September at Thule Park down here in the Chesterfield, Chatham area. And so that, again, that would be something where, as a nonprofit, you may not be the one who's organizing in terms of getting that together, but you could then gather your students and get them to those type of events and help support that in that way. So, so thank you for that collaboration reminder.
Okay, not a problem. I can think of some folks on the west side, right off the top of my head who might be interested in speaking with you further. Again, that's not my area. That's not my area of expertise. I haven't gone through that process. I'm afraid to say I won't even tell you in how many years, and I would be totally useless.
Well,
that's okay. The best I can do is reach out. Huh?
Well, that's okay. That's okay. Well, like I mentioned too, that even if you had gone to college 5 years, things have changed. Or even 2 years ago, you were used to doing your FAFSA January 1st. That even somebody who's just graduated, your information is now out of date. So don't feel bad about that.
Okay, great. So I can connect you with people and crowds. But,
appreciate it.
Yeah, that helps. Okay, so I want to remind our listening audience that you're listening to Nonprofit U, and we're speaking with J.P. Paulus, the president of Do-Gooder Consulting, regarding strategies to finance college education and for strategies to help students make effective transitions. We'll be taking calls from our listening audience from telephone, and then if you're in the chat room and you want to chime in, now is the time to post your question. Our call-in number is 347-884-8121. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. And if you don't call in, we do strongly recommend that you share this podcast with, your friends who may have kids interested in college. Share it with other nonprofits that may have access to parents and students so that they can get a jump start. I think one of the big problems that we have in minority communities, particularly low-income minority communities, is we don't get this information out soon enough. So it's really not too soon, to be thinking about this. I know we're kind of winding down from our school year, but it's still not too soon to start. Okay, so JP, one of the greatest barriers to earning a college degree is the cost. I was looking at U.S. News and World Report, and I was shocked, absolutely shocked to read that 70% of the college graduates have student loans in the range of $37,172. So, that's a whole salary for some folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you low-income minority communities, the barriers, beyond cost are even greater, just having the sheer access to capital. And you mentioned loans earlier. So can you elaborate on that and the benefits as well as the dangers, and then talk about other strategies such as work study?
Yeah. Well, first thing, let's see, I'm going to touch on the work study because it's a little bit easier, and just the idea with work study is that people will think, oh, well, that's just a job like a Starbucks job, but really with work study, there's a lot of advantages to it. That a couple things is that the reason why it's set up too is that they also understand your college schedule, whereas with Starbucks, if you have a final the next day and they assign you to a shift, they really don't care. Where with work study, it'll work around your class schedule, and also when you fill out the FAFSA in terms of financial aid, the money that you earn for work study, they don't count that for your next year's financial aid. So they expect the money that you use to use it for that year. And if you're smart and you can save some money, you don't have to necessarily spend it on, if you need to send it home or something like that. If you're wise about your money, you can do that. If you don't blow it all, like let's say on Sunday night pizza or Monday night, Tuesday night pizzas or whatever. And so, it's something that's very helpful, and those work study jobs are usually close to campus as well. So there's a lot of advantage to that. So that's one aspect to look at, rather than just getting any job, but getting the right job. So work study is one of those options, and so certainly worth it. And then with loans, just looking at those, I'd have to look at the report to see exactly where those loans come from. But part of the problem too is that I think people are taking the wrong loans out. So one of the things that we're putting on Twitter at Do Gooder Chicago is sort of the different loans that are available. So I'm going to go from worst to best. So just so people know what kind of loans they might be considering taking that they should or shouldn't. So like a payday loan, for example, you should never use it for anything. But I think that might be some things that get people into trouble. Credit cards, I would only recommend that only if you need that for your very last semester. If that's the only thing that's stopping you from graduating your last semester, that might be that might be okay. But other than that, people shouldn't use that kind of debt for that, and even private loans that there are companies that, and they've been cutting down on that lately, but even I think that's where I think a lot of people get into trouble, is getting those kinds of loans and going because of that option. So they should be very careful of that. And the colleges themselves might offer a loan, so you want to be careful of the colleges as well, depending on what kind of college. And especially the problem too, I think, is that people are picking colleges such as for-profit colleges, which have exorbitant prices, but then they aren't getting much for that money. And again, because of legislation, a lot of those things have been shutting down. But now with this new administration might be a little more favorable to, they might be a little more biased towards for-profit colleges, so there might be some more danger in that. So even be careful of institutional loans. Federal loans are the ones that you really want to look at, and those are the Stafford loans and Perkins loans. And the thing is with those loans, which kind of shocks me looking at those averages, is that there are limits on those kind of loans too. So the idea with federal loans is that the purpose is not to get you into debt. The purpose is just to help you make it over that financial hump to graduate. And so they have limits on that. And with federal loans, they also do entrance interviews and exit interviews, so to help you make sure that you're borrowing wisely and that you are not making bad decisions that will affect you later. So again, so if you're looking into loans, if you can't make it, if you feel like you need a loan other than a federal loan, I would at that point I would be very careful and really check to see what are you at the right school then for that. And again, again, odds are that if they're in a for-profit college, then you're really in the wrong college, and you really need to transfer out or find something that's better for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so are there other sources of financial aid? And you went
so there's
list.
Yeah, so I've got a short list here of things that are different options that are out there for people that, and we'll post the Do Gooder Chicago the Twitter page. We'll post this in detail, but just to run through them really quick, some different options you want to consider are 529 plans, which include prepaid tuition. In Illinois, that's the College Illinois program. And basically, I describe that as college on layaway. So you're paying for your semester ahead of time at today's prices. So rather than waiting for inflation to catch up, you can start prepaying your tuition ahead of time. And that's a way to save money, and there's some tax advantages to that. There's also, in Illinois, again, there's a Bright Start college savings plan. So that's another alternative where you don't have to pay a whole tuition, but there are some advantages with that. Another way to pay for college is public service. Now, with that service, it's usually done before entering college, so you'd have to check and see if that makes sense for your student. So those kind of options include military, the Peace Corps, or AmeriCorps. Another options include employee reimbursement. So sometimes it might be just for the employee to go back to school, and they'll help pay for that tuition. But some professions, such as teachers, for example, they might actually do that for your children. So that's something to look into. Payment plans are also another way for people to consider, so that if you can't come up with your portion of the tuition at the beginning of the semester, they might be willing to work with you to create a payment plan so you can spread that out. Another option to save money or to sort of be financially wise is deferred admission. So people may not realize this, but in many cases you can wait up to 1 year before entering college. You have to inform them first, but what you can then do in that 1 year is gives you some time to raise funds, whether it's through working or there's other kinds of fundraising. So, or if you may decide to go to a community college to get some credits before you can transfer over, and then that could save you some money. So that's something to consider. And something that's been relatively new, but is that some schools, such as the Chicago Public Schools, for example, have a partnership with their city colleges, where students can go to high school and college at the same time, so they can take certain college classes. And with that, they can get college credit while they're in high school. And so that's another way that you can sort of cut off some money. And then also, and just sort of along with that is AP classes as well, where you can basically take tests that will, again, cut off, basically give you college credit. So those are two ways to get college credit while you're in high school. Another option that's out there is crowdfunding. So now this is pretty relatively new, and so there's some varying success on that. But I know some students who have used things like Kickstarter or GoFundMe to collect money, and especially if you have a good social network, that might be a great way to sort of spread the word and have, So that's something that's new. That again, back in our day, we didn't have that. You would have to just go personally go up to grandma or other people to get some money. But this might be a better way for people here. And then there's some other options too. There's organizations that give scholarships, but they have a whole program involved with it. So, for example, the Posse Foundation has kids come together basically as a group, as a cohort, or what they call a posse, and they get to know each other in high school, and then they go together to a specific college. So, let's say Middlebury College is one of those that people, let's say a group of students from Chicago could go to. And part of their program is that they're going to be working together and helping support each other, which is, I think, one of the other vital things that to keep kids not only in college but more importantly to graduate, is if you have a community that can really help you to succeed. And so the Posse Foundation is one of those. There's another one that's based in Chicago called Pursue Scholars that is similar to Posse, except that they focus on students who are involved in youth ministries and getting them to Christian colleges. So those are some options. I don't know if there are any of the listeners have been sending anything in the chat room, but any other suggestions? we'd love to add those on there.
Yeah, you know what? Something I have not heard, and it's just old-fashioned. What's starting to save, for college when your children are born.
Yeah, and again, that's where that, especially that prepaid tuition comes in. That you can, as soon as they're born, you can set up an account for them, and then usually over 10 years, or if you do it that early, I'm not sure they can extend it to 15 years, but you can set up that prepaid tuition program. Again, that's college on layaway, so that they're paying the price that if they were going, so they're paying the price that if they were going to college right that year, the year they were born, you would pay that price. But then by the time that newborn gets to age 18, even if their tuition is doubled, from, let's say it was $10,000 when you started it, but then the tuition is $20,000 by the time they actually get to college, you've only paying that $10,000. So that is definitely, so if you're able to do that, then that's something you want to consider. If you're able to do that, definitely you need to have a tight budget on that. But if you're able to do that, it definitely would benefit. And like I said, that there are some tax benefits in that as well.
All right, so that's better than an old-fashioned bank account. I was just thinking about growing a few dollars away at a regular bank account, but that's way better. So you're locking into a price. I guess futures for college education. That's what it sounds like to me. You're getting a contract at today's price, and I think that's pretty beneficial. When I was in school, I believe you could go to the University of Illinois for about $4,000 a year, something like that.
Wow. Yeah, and now that's the price of a community college. So that's
right.
Yeah. So now I know it's much bigger than that, but if that price doubles from whatever it is now, that which was it now, 12,000 or more?
Yeah.
That price is locked in for today's price. You don't have to worry about that.
Wow. And education, the cost of education and healthcare seems to just, to me, grow faster than a rate of of inflation.
Absolutely. And so that's why we do need to get those strategies ahead of time, and combining all those different aspects from sort of that scholarship collection to doing prepaid tuition. Once you put all those together, then then the price doesn't seem as scary as when as it does now. Just looking at it straight out and comparing it to when we went to college.
Right. Okay. And another one of the greatest challenges to finishing college, especially for inner city minority students, is culture shock, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's culture shock of going to either a large campus or even a smaller campus where, kids come from a different background, usually, white or more affluent, and that can be discouraging, just not fitting in. So what are some of the strategies that you would recommend for these kids to increase their chances of success?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, part of the thing that we talked about community, and I think that's really the key thing of there. And there's some different types of communities you can build. So again, like with the Policy Foundation, that they've already sort of built a little community ahead of time, so that students walking into that college, you've got other students who understand what you're going through and can help you do things. For me, a community that was very useful for me was InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. And so those, especially those coming in, and there's also Campus Crusade for Christ, or known as Crew now, or Navigators. So those are some things that you can direct students to right away. And sort of the beauty of the internet and the age that we're in now is that you can find out all about these different kinds of programs, but then you can also contact these people in real time too, so that you don't have to wait till that very first day, that you can start getting to know people ahead of time. And see, who's out there, that they can sort of be there for you. So that way, when you're in there, you don't feel alone, but that you've got somebody there that you can trust. And then also the other thing that we have on college campuses nowadays, I think, are very strong multicultural offices. So especially like if you're a specific ethnic group, that can that you've got somebody that's there that can help can help you talk through those different issues, and that you can speak honestly with on that as well. And I think the other thing too, this is just kind of, since we sort of brought this up here, just kind of a random thing, but just something to really for nonprofits, if you're guiding your youth to really maybe challenge them onto is so that even some of those privileged students that look for the ones that are sort of quiet, because I think those are people that the students can, if they make friends with them right away, that they can help maybe get some trust in, so that those students too will be less judgmental and more willing to help in the areas that the student needs help with. And but I think you need to really sort of get those students ahead of time, so that way, again, with building community and building trust, that's the key thing, is having people that you can trust, and there are people that are out there.
Okay, awesome. Okay, I want to remind our listening audience again that you're listening to Nonprofit U, and we're speaking with J.P. Paulus, president of Do-Gooder Consulting. We're talking about financing college education, making wise decisions, and right about now we're talking about also strategies for finding other sorts of social supports. We've extended our podcast to an hour, and we're taking questions from our listening audience as well as our chat room. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them out. Feel free to call in. The number is 347-884-8121. Again, that number is 347-884-8121. If you don't call in, we do ask that you share this podcast with those friends of yours who may have kids thinking about college. Share this with high school counselors, people in your churches, other nonprofits, even your elected officials. In short, just share this with people who have access to other crowds of people. This is information that we don't hear regularly, and we usually find ourselves scrambling at the very last minute or even when it's too late, So I really do appreciate JP for coming on and cutting our heads open and pouring in knowledge. So with that said, JP, what are some of the common mistakes that students make when it comes to college?
Yeah, well, I think one big one that we had mentioned before is the the for-profit colleges. And the problem is that with these colleges, they really sorry about that, I'm listening on the other line here. One of the biggest problems is that they listen to all the commercials and which make the college look good, but they don't necessarily know that people really look at those colleges, really respect those colleges. So they choose their college based on what they see versus what they actually know based on what people are saying. Like let's say employers are looking at, and so that's a big problem. And I think, or they might be choosing their college based on superficial things, like is the sports team good? Especially if they're not the star player. So if they're being recruited by a major university, okay, great, then you should look at what's the best team for you. But if that's not you, if you're just going there because of parties or whatnot, then no. So just making sure that they choose it in the for the right reasons.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And then too, I find that people may go into careers for money. Right? You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so even though, we do want our kids to be successful as they can be, but we shouldn't push them just because really if it's a career that we wish we could have gone into or things that will make us feel better. And I know that sort of goes against what we've been taught, that we want our kids to do better than what we did, but we really want them to pick the right career for them, because if they choose something that they don't like, then they might be able to push through it for a couple of years, but at some point then they're going to break, and then all of that work has gone for nothing, versus if it's something that they're passionate about. And again, with wise mentors, we might be, let's say if they are somebody who's going into the arts, a wise mentor might help them too to learn that, okay, you do need to have maybe a secondary job until your career in acting or whatever takes off. But again, we shouldn't push them just to get the money, the job, just because it's about the money. Because if they're doing something that they're passionate about and they really love, they can become successful at it, and possibly even more successful than if they went to the job that is supposed to be the good job.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the strategies you would recommend for students that are drowning in student loan debt? That's a huge problem now.
Yeah. So I think it depends on where they are with it too. So if you are, if you've already graduated, it's a couple things that you need to know is that there are some options. That the first thing is don't pay your student loans, because that will hurt so many things, from credit to other things. So you can call the student loan organization, and then they can help work with you. There's some different options that are out there nowadays, especially with some recent legislation, so that you may be able to get graduated repayments, so that you don't have to. So if your payments are too much right now, they might be able to work with you on that. There are different ways to possibly cancel the debt, or depending on your career field as well. There's working for a number of different government agencies that could also automatically reduce your student loan debt. Just by the fact that you're working with them, so that they aren't taking it from your paycheck, but they're just actually literally erasing your debt. So those are some options to do that. Also, so again, and depending on your career, so that if you're going into teaching and you decide to teach in a higher poverty area, those are some other ways to get your debt erased. If you're currently in that situation, again, you want to check and see where are you. So if you are at a for-profit college, then that's probably the reason why you're getting a lot of debt, and it's not going to be helpful for you. And, so you definitely want to transfer to another university that will, especially like a state or a local university that can help you to graduate, because without that college degree, you'll have the same loan as somebody who did graduate, but you won't be able to get the job you need to pay off that debt. So whether you graduate or not, you're still responsible for the debt. But if you graduate, that'll help you to be able to get rid of that debt in a way that's helpful for you.
Okay, great. We know that students who have B averages and above, it's relatively easy for them, and I say that's relative. Everything is so competitive now, but relative to your average students, they have an easier time, getting financial aid and scholarships. Are you aware of any scholarship programs and other strategies that average students, or even those marginal students, can utilize?
Yeah, well, I think what students need to do is really think of the scholarship search as basically a job. And again, it's really a job where I can't think of too many other jobs where that are legal, ethical, or available, where you could make $100 an hour for work that that you can do that will pay for college. So even if you're going for what seems like small scholarships, like $300, $500, by itself, it's not a lot. But again, if you collect them like baseball cards, when you bring them all together, you get something that's very valuable. And so what you want to do then is look at local areas. So whether it's like a small business, see if they have scholarships. Also, again, doing those searches like at Scholarship Mom. Those are some ways that that you can collect those scholarships and start early too, so that even if they're young, they might be able to collect scholarships. Depending on, sometimes they have scholarships for even middle school students. So you definitely want to be on the lookout for that. But basically, make that scholarship search a part-time job, because again, if even if in a way it's like a sales job, where when people do sales, sometimes a lot of times when they do visits and things like that, they don't get the sale. So, but it doesn't mean that they're not working. But then when they get that sale, that's then it really comes together, and then all that effort that they made in those failed sales really works out. So I would just try to get your students in the mindset that they're doing a job, and then again, that every time they win a scholarship, even if it's a small one, that's money that they've earned. So hopefully
Yeah,
that would
so
be one way just to change mindset.
right, a number of churches and social clubs, give out scholarships. They may have, maybe the only requirement in some cases is that they get accepted to college and they can show that they're going. So I think you're absolutely right. Just try to piece together the smaller ones.
Yeah, and the other thing too is just to ask people too. So and to not be afraid of just applying, even if it doesn't seem like it. So there's an anecdote that I've had where a student had applied for a scholarship from a company that makes tombstones at cemeteries. And they just did it on the fly. They didn't think it would be any big deal. But what they found out later was that that scholarship was available for 10 students, but only 9 others had applied. So the fact that they just applied for it gave them the opportunity to actually win that scholarship.
Wow. So what are some of the lessons that... Okay,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. So what are some of the lessons that you learned along the way as they relate to financing college education and then making that transition to college?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is, again, I think we've touched on that a lot, is the big thing is community, that students who have a community before college and also at that college are far more likely to succeed. And again, that's where the collaboration comes in, where it's inspiration, where even if things get down for a student, if they have a community, they've got somebody there that can help pick them up. And if they get discouraged, if they didn't get that scholarship that they thought they would get, or even if they didn't get that grade that they thought they would get, having a community will help you to sustain that and get you through that hump. And so I think that's a huge thing that I think, especially, again, nonprofit organizations that are tuning in, that's something that they can help build and that they can help develop and sustain. And that's one of the areas where you can shine at. I think one of the other lessons just learning too is that just seeing from other students is that without good planning, that it's very hard to succeed. But if you plan ahead of time, if you, again, like doing those things, those steps that we talked about, especially like finding that right fit. And again, those programs are available for students as young as 13, where they can just type in answer some questions, find out their interests. So if you can find that out early enough, then you can start doing things like internships with appropriate people, and then those internships, you can find out what is the best college for you, so that that way they aren't wasting the wrong time in a bad college. So again, let's say if you did hairdressing, if there's a certain college that advertises that they train barbers, but if that's not the one but if the people who are in that industry don't respect it, then it doesn't make sense to go to that college.
Right.
And again, trying to find what is the best value and the best and looking in places that you wouldn't think of. So, for example, Kennedy King College, which is a community college here in Chicago, they have a culinary program that's there, and the benefit of them versus a for-profit college like Le Cordon Bleu is that this community college, then you also have access to business classes as well, so other things that can help your business. And the other thing too is, at least with the community college, they do work in restaurant settings, so people really get a great experience there. Even though you think, you went to community college, but that at least in that program, you've got some connections in a lot of ways where you can succeed. Versus, again, the college that you see on commercials all the time.
Okay, great. So we've come to the end of our show, and I'd like to thank J.P. Paulus, the president of Do-Gooder Consulting, for being a guest today. Before we go, J.P., would you care to share any parting thoughts and tell our listening audience how they can get in contact with you?
Yeah, well, I guess I would like to just say that even though no matter how daunting this college experience seems, and it has become more complicated in some ways over the years, there's also many more resources that are available, certainly more than what we had when we were growing up. And if I can, again, plug myself, I'm certainly one of those resources, and I would love to work with not just individuals, but more importantly with churches and nonprofits to help you build a sustainable program so that you help your youth not just get to college, but more importantly to graduate. Because again, as we mentioned, that dropping out will just put you into debt without the benefits of college. So we really want to strive for getting our students to graduate. And again, the biggest thing for organizations that are tuning in is that you have a unique role and authority in the lives of your families. And it's okay that after listening to all this that you still don't feel equipped to help. There are people out there who can. I'm one of them. You can call me at 872-222-8008 if you have any questions or want to just connect. You can also email me, jp@do-gooder.us, and then you can also check my website as well if you need any questions answered about what I do. Or also you can check the blog too, where I try to post up some advice, especially on the area of financial aid and the college going process, and that's at blog.do-gooder.us.
Awesome. Okay, I want to thank our listening audience for listening to today's show. You've joined us at Nonprofit U Blog Radio Talk Show. The show will be available for download within about an hour. And again, we're encouraging you to share this in your network. We want to make sure that students for next year get a really early start, especially with the changes in a number of these deadlines. So be sure to tune in next week. I'm sorry, it sounds like you had one more thing to add.
Yeah, sorry, Valerie, I forgot to just remind people too that again we've on Twitter, if you go to the handle at Do Gooder Chicago, we've posted a lot of the graphics of the things that we've talked about. So if you are trying to visualize what we're talking about, we have it out there as well. So again, use the hashtags that Valerie has provided, of the hashtag NonprofitU, or also the hashtag 4 Steps to College, where the 4 and the 2 are the numbers 4 and 2.
Okay, awesome. And on that note, I want to admonish you to be sure to tune in next week for a discussion on performance management. Again, JP, thank you so much. I've learned a whole lot. Things have definitely changed since I was in school.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Valerie. Appreciate it. And I'll be tuning in next week as well.
Yes, thank you so much. And we will definitely be in touch so we can collaborate on getting the word out to our kids.
Great. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yo, everybody get up! Everybody get up! Everybody needs to understand that I'm more than simply a hype man for this rap group. Just like Geico is more than just a company that can save you money. Geico also has fast and friendly claim service, so they can help you when you need it most. And while I do love being a hype man, I also love reading for children's audiobooks. Like Little Bo Peep, she lost the sheep, and she don't know where to find them. Yo!
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.